back in the day, let's back up just a little bit and see where we came from. In the 1930s and the 1940s, the Hollywood studio system was in full swing. Different studios were known to make certain types of films and would only show them in movie theaters across the nation that they specifically owned. For example, MGM. MGM was the king of the studios. They were known for the biggest stars, the lavish glamour, the most sex appeal. They made huge spectacles like Grand Hotel, Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz. 20th Century Fox was known for musicals. Their singing stars were Shirley Temple, Carmen Miranda. They had movies like Sound of Music, South Pacific. Columbia Pictures and their favorite director, Frank Capra, was known to create folksy, feel-good fairy tale pictures. These included It Happened One Night, Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert, 1934 Best Picture. It's really funny. Check it out. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington with Jimmy Stewart. Talk of the Town. Warner Brothers. They were the gritty studio. They loved the gangster films like Little Caesar, Scarface, The Public Enemy. And then there was Universal. And Universal loved the monster movies. Big budgets with A-list actors, top-notch special effects. Movies that became classics like Dracula, Frankenstein, The Wolfman, The Invisible Man, The Mummy. And these made a lot of money for the studio. So much, in fact, that a number of the cheaper studios wanted to cash in on this fantastic monster mania success. But without, of course, all that expensive actors or good scripts or even decent effects. Movies like Octoman, The Phantom Creeps, The Alligator People. Okay, so these are kind of like B movies you would find in the middle of the night, right? They're not really tearing up the charts as far as critical acclaim. The Horror of Beach Party. It does actually look quite horrible. It Conquered the World. I don't know what it is. The Phantom Menace, right? So this basically destroyed destroyed horror films. They became the laughing stock of the industry. And along comes Ridley Scott. And Ridley Scott wanted to change all of this because he knew that horror films were kind of a joke and nobody wanted to fund them. Nobody wanted to make them. Released in 1979, his horror science fiction film contained a highly aggressive extraterrestrial creature that stalks and kills the crew of a spaceship. And of course, this had top stars, a big budget, a great script, phenomenal special effects. In fact, it won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, and he won the award for Best Director. What movie is this? Alien. And it was a giant success. Years later, a gentleman comes along who just happened to already want to write the sequel. So it wasn't his movie, and he wasn't even involved in the first movie, but he decided to write a sequel to an existing movie, okay? And this time, all he did was add the letter S to it, and he wrote Aliens. 2 different directors, 2 different writers, okay? So instead of Ridley Scott, who was actually off busy directing Tom Cruise in Legend, here comes our old friend James Cameron again, who never fails for big, expensive ideas, okay? Now, James Cameron actually worked with a guy named Phil Tippett, and Phil Tippett was working with him on his 1984 picture, The Terminator, where they animated the robot who was walking across the war zone, the full body shots with stop motion puppetry for the robotic Terminator who was walking across the Skynet destroyed landscape of skulls and rocks. This is kind of a scary picture of film. Phil, here's a younger picture of film. And as you can see, he's no stranger to big budget, famous films. The new Aliens for the sequel were supposed to be along the same stop motion lines, okay? All hunky-dory so far. However, James had other ideas. He realized that he needed to give the sequel another kind of punch up, so to speak. and not just to have the same type of creatures from the first film. Though he used stop motion in the Terminator for the full body robot shots, he wanted to push the opportunity to have a full body alien presence on set that could interact with the actors. He wanted the alien queen to be right there in the scene with the actors. Oh, and he also wanted it to be about 14 feet tall. So this is actually James Cameron's original drawing for what he wanted. Fairly tall order. So how do you actually pull this off? Well, you call your best friend Stan Winston, who also later became his future business partner. Building the beast. It was actually James Cameron himself that came up with the idea how to house two puppeteers inside the torso of the queen and control her forearms with that, and then have the giant head and weight held up by an overhead crane. Everybody thought this was crazy, and they loved it. Here's kind of like a quick idea of what they could do. You would tape the two, or bind the two performers together. You got 4 arms to work with, 4 arms on the alien. You could use ski poles to extend the arms to make them even more alien and kind of scary, right? Small torso arms would be the stuntmen's free arm each, right? Other key functions would be controlled by, of course, external rods and wires and hydraulics. And the advantage of actually having people in the suit enabled the alien to have far more dynamic range than what could be achieved with simply rods and ropes and pulleys. Here's the maquette, a 1:4 scale maquette. They actually built the actual puppet in England just by eyeballing the script. Now, of course, it's a puppet at first, then it becomes an animatronic when you add the mechanics to it. So after you actually sculpt the character full size, you make a mold of the sculpt, which is basically an exact reverse of it. You fill the mold with a lightweight poly foam. You let it harden. You paint it up. The poly foam was used, it was light enough to be held up by the ski pole extended arms by the stunt people inside. And the stuntmen could control all 4 arms as well as side-to-side movement of the tail with foot pedals. And the queen can be supported by a variety of rigs, either on top or bottom or along his spine, or her spine actually, depending on where the camera actually needed to be. A custom power steering hydraulic was crafted to move the alien's head around, up and down, because even though it's made with polyfoam, you still have the weight of the cables, the mechanics, and of course the 2 people in the chest. Right? The tip of the tail was simply attached to a cable. Here is the alien queen coming together, all 14 horrible feet of her, right? There were actually 2 alien heads built. Remember what we said about backing up miniatures? You don't want any downtime in shooting when something breaks, and something always breaks on set. Each one of the heads had an animatable jaw and lips. And one version was built out of a tougher material so the actors could kind of smack it around a little bit, right? And then the other hero version of the alien head included an extending tongue, right? There were other versions, including a half dozen 8-foot tall puppets, and some were literally just foam puppets, floppy foam puppets for stunt sequences. You keep those very lightweight. They're very soft. And you'll see that as Ridley falls down the shaft, the elevator shaft, in the climactic sequence here, that's the version that you're going to use. In all, it required 8 operators to bring the alien queen to life on set. Let's take a look.